Welcome back to Occult Archives,
Glad to be here.
where we kind of take a look at these books, these
Yeah.
mysterious books, some might say feared books,
Mm-hmm.
and we try to kind of dive into what they're all about.
Right.
And today's deep dive is going to be on
Sounds good.
God wisdom, a vision of Theosophy. Now, I know that might sound...
By Annie Besant.
By Annie Besant, thank you. That might sound pretty intense.
Yeah.
To some people, but we're going to try to break it down and make it make sense.
Sure.
So I guess first off,
Of course.
what is Theosophy?
Well, Theosophy, the word itself actually comes from Greek.
Okay.
Theos and Sophia, meaning God and wisdom. So it translates literally to God wisdom.
Okay, so right off the bat, we're dealing with some pretty, heady
Yeah.
concepts here.
Mm-hmm. And Annie Besant even points out that, even just the dictionary definition
Okay.
sort of touches on that. It talks about claiming direct knowledge of God and spirits.
Okay, so that sounds a lot like
Yeah.
mysticism to me.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has that element to it.
Alright.
She talks about this kind of dual nature of Theosophy.
Uh-huh.
There's that primary meaning, which is this direct experience
Mm-hmm.
of God.
Okay.
And she sees this actually at the heart of all real religion, right?
Yeah.
That's the highest knowledge that we can attain.
Okay.
This knowledge of him by whom all else is known, right? So
Yeah,
it's very
mystical.
mystical.
That's
Yeah.
pretty deep.
Mhm.
And so then what is the secondary
Yeah.
meaning?
So the secondary meaning
That's
is
that.
where Theosophy really starts to take shape as this kind of system of thought,
Okay.
right? It's like a body of doctrines or beliefs.
Right.
Right. And it's formed by identifying this common ground
Right.
between all the world's religions.
Okay, so it's looking
Yeah.
past the differences
Right.
in religion and saying,
Exactly. What are those fundamental truths
okay,
that are at the heart of all these different expressions?
you're like the universal truth that binds them all together.
Wisdom religion,
Yes.
a universal religion.
Okay, so,
Um,
and the term Theosophy, this isn't something that
No.
was new
Yes.
in
It's actually...
a really old term.
Okay.
It goes all the way back to the 3rd century
Wow.
AD with Ammonius Saccas.
Okay.
And he was talking about both this kind of mystical experience
Mhm.
and this kind of bringing together of different traditions
Yeah.
into an eclectic system.
Okay, so then why the big resurgence in 1875 in America and Europe?
That's a really interesting time period, right? Because
Yeah.
it was this time when, traditional religion,
Yeah.
especially in the West, Christianity
Okay.
was really being challenged intellectually, You
Yeah.
have things like comparative mythology coming up.
Right.
And they're looking at all these religions.
And they're seeing all these similarities. They're like, well, maybe they just kind of evolved, right?
Right.
Maybe it's this kind of evolutionary...
From a base?
Yeah.
Like a base kind of?
From primitive beliefs
Okay.
to more sophisticated,
Right. So instead of it being
This is
like a
insane.
divine...
not necessarily divinely inspired in the sense of
Okay.
coming directly from God, but
Right.
sort of evolving naturally,
Yeah.
as humanity progresses.
Okay. So
That-
Theosophy comes along and says,
yeah. Theosophy says, hold on.
Okay.
There's another explanation for all these similarities.
okay.
Right?
Right.
And what they propose is that there's this brotherhood of divine men
Right.
who basically send out messengers
Okay.
periodically
Okay.
to establish new religions.
Oh.
And these religions all have the same core truths,
Okay.
but they're adapted, right, to
Okay.
the time and the place.
Right. And the people.
So, it's coming from the same source, but it's being
Okay.
altered a little bit.
Yeah.
But-
It's tailored.
Sure.
Yeah. It's tailored to
Okay.
what humanity can understand at that point.
Okay, so then they're not attributing it to,
God.
shared human experiences or
Mhm.
evolutionary pressures.
Right. They're saying there's an intelligence behind it.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
somewhat, some,
Like a plan almost.
he was doing this.
Like a guiding and
Medical
force
friendship.
behind it. Yeah.
So it contrasts that with the...
Right. So it's different from the evolutionary hypothesis.
Okay.
It's also different from the traditional Christian view
Okay.
of a pristine revelation that then gets corrupted.
Right.
Theosophy is saying, no.
Okay.
There's unity right from the beginning.
Okay.
And each religion is actually contributing its own
Okay.
unique note.
To this kind of symphony of human evolution.
So it's different
Yeah.
instruments in an
Yeah.
orchestra playing different melodies
Exactly.
that all come together to make
all kind of
Right.
contributing to this one grand
One big
harmony.
harmony.
Yeah.
Okay. So what
Yeah.
what notes does Besant say
Right.
are being played by the different religions?
Well, she gives some really interesting examples. She talks about Zoroastrianism, and she says, the principle of purity there
Okay.
is really front and center.
Okay.
Like purity of your surroundings, your physical body, your thoughts, all of that.
Okay.
She talks about Hebraism, and, they're really focused on righteousness.
Okay.
And Egypt, kind of surprisingly, she says that its contribution is science,
Okay.
which is interesting to think about.
Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that.
And then Buddhism is right knowledge.
Okay.
Greece is beauty. Rome is law. Christianity is the individual, right? Like the importance of the individual and self-sacrifice.
Okay.
And then Islam is this declaration of the unity of God.
So she's really like breaking it down into like the
Yeah, she's trying to get at like
essence of each
the
film.
core essence of each tradition.
Okay. So moving on, then she also
Yeah.
presents Theosophy as science. And that might
sound a little strange to some people.
a little bit. How does she kind of
Yeah.
reconcile those two things?
So what she says is that, Theosophy totally accepts the scientific method.
Okay.
Right?
I get it.
Observation, experimentation, all of that.
Okay.
But she says it applies these tools
Okay.
to a much bigger area of existence, right?
Okay.
It doesn't just focus on what she calls form or matter,
Okay.
which is the physical stuff that we see around us,
Okay.
but it also includes life and spirit,
Okay.
right? So that realm of consciousness, energy, all that kind of stuff.
So it's expanding what science can be applied to,
Exactly.
not just limiting it to the physical world.
Yeah, it's about broadening that scope
Okay.
of scientific inquiry.
Okay. So she brings up these two fundamental parts of existence.
Yeah, she talks about spirit and matter.
Okay.
And these aren't like two opposing things,
Okay.
but they're actually two aspects of the same like fundamental reality.
All right.
And they come from the logos, which is like the divine
Okay.
made manifest.
Okay.
And they eventually go back to that oneness.
Okay.
Right? At the end of this kind of like cosmic cycle.
Okay.
And spirit is rooted in motion,
Okay.
right? Which we perceive as time.
Okay.
And matter is rooted in stillness, which we perceive as space.
Okay. So it's like
So they're both coming from the same...
two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And then how does evolution play into this?
Right. So the evolution science...
Theosophy sees evolution as being driven by this like inherent will to live.
Okay.
Right. And she actually quotes W.K. Clifford, who was a mathematician and philosopher, and he said, those ancient reptiles, they wanted to fly so badly, that they eventually became birds.
Okay. So it wasn't just random.
So it's not just this random mutation in natural selection.
Yeah.
It's like there's this inner drive.
There's a will behind it.
To evolve, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And this is where she gets into this idea of superphysical research.
Okay.
Right? She says, look, there are these other
Okay.
spheres of reality, right, beyond the physical that we normally interact with.
Okay.
And you can actually investigate these realms
Oh, okay.
if you develop the right bodies and senses for it.
Okay, so this is where it gets really... Yeah, and she says that there are these people called occultists, and they're the ones who study these hidden aspects of nature, and they claim to have developed these more refined senses.
Okay, so you're saying there are other realms of reality.
Yeah, she's talking about a much bigger universe.
And there might even be ways to experience them
than we normally...
through senses that we don't typically use.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And to kind of like...
So how do we wrap our...
make sense of this?
Heads around this?
She provides this table of correspondences.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And this table is basically like a map of these different spheres of existence, both the ones that are like unmanifested and the ones that have taken form.
Okay.
Right. And it talks about the bodies that you would need to interact with these spheres and the states of consciousness that are expressed through them. Okay, can you break that down a little bit more?
Sure. So at the very top level, she talks about these unmanifested realms, the divine Adi Logos, and the monadic Anupadaka. And this is where we find the human monad, which she calls the eternal man. And this monad is like a fragment of the divine life. Right. Expressing these qualities of will, wisdom, and creative activity. And so this monad sends out a ray of itself down into the 5 manifested spheres.
And that ray is?
Yeah, and that ray becomes us. Right? It draws in matter from these higher spheres. And it forms the human spirit. And then that spirit individualizes further to form the ego, the sense of self.
And we're all on this journey.
And then that ego goes on this journey of evolution.
Of developing our,
unfolding all these latent powers that are within that monad.
And so as it interacts with matter in these different spheres, the parent monad is like feeding it more life and giving it more knowledge.
So we're learning and growing.
It's like a constant process of
across these different levels of reality.
Exactly.
And so the table goes on to say,
so she goes on to detail all these different bodies that the spirit forms to interact with each sphere. And in the lower spheres, the denser spheres, it's using, kind of coarser matter to form the personality. Which is like the lower bodies that we have in a single lifetime.
So that's like
the physical body. The astral body. Those are temporary, right? And then there's the individuality, which are the more enduring higher bodies, like the mental body, the causal body, the intuitional body, the spiritual body. And those persist across lifetimes.
So the personality...
So the personality is who we are in a given life.
Current identity. And then the individuality is our...
And the individuality is that, the spiritual essence.
That's reincarnating.
Reincarnating, yeah.
And then she also talks about the...
And she also mentions things like the etheric double. Which is like a finer counterpart of the physical body. And it has these things called chakrams. Yeah, which are like these energy centers. And these are like points of connection between the physical and the astral planes.
And you can
and she even mentions etheric vision.
Chakrams and stuff.
Which is the ability to see these energies and subtle phenomena.
And she also talks about the etheric brain.
And how that plays a role in dreams.
So we're really...
So it's a much more...
dealing with a lot of complicated...
intricate...
interconnectedness here.
Reality.
So then how does Theosophy bridge all this with... morality and art?
Well, with morality, she's basically saying that morality is the science of harmonious relations. Between all living beings. And the basis of this ethical framework is this principle of one omnipresent life that permeates everything. So if we're all part of this one life, then harming someone else is actually harming yourself.
It's like we're all connected.
So like we're all...
If you hurt someone else,
interconnected.
You're hurting yourselves too.
Exactly.
Because it's all one thing.
And she identifies love and hate as like these 2 root emotions. And these come from desire, which is like this fundamental force in the cosmos.
Of like attraction and...
like the propulsion.
That attraction, that repulsion. And she says... virtues are expressions of love. And truth is like the intellectual expression of this.
So then what about all the rules in religion? Like you should do this, you shouldn't do that.
So she points out that, these great spiritual teachers throughout history, they've all given us these like universal precepts. Like be good to others. The golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. And she says, Theosophy explains these by saying, when you do good to others, it actually creates, like, good vibes. It creates harmony on a subtle level. So, like, returning good for evil isn't just, like, a nice thing to do. It's actually...
creating a more harmonious environment. Energetically.
And so she's not trying to say that Theosophy is like the new set of rules.
It's not a new moral code. It's more like trying to explain the underlying principles behind those rules. You know?
And she also talks about...
And she stresses the importance of like having high ideals.
Okay.
Meditating.
Okay.
To develop your character. These are all really important.
All right. And then art.
Mm-hmm.
How does she tie art into this?
So she talks about beauty as like the law of manifestation.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So ugliness is like unnatural.
Okay.
It's like a deviation from harmony.
Okay.
And she says that religion has always been like the inspiration for great art.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Like when you have this decline in religious inspiration, you get art that's just imitation.
Okay.
It's not truly creative.
Okay, so it's not just copying what's already.
It's not about copying. It's about tapping into...
It's about finding something deeper.
That deeper ideal of beauty.
Mm-hmm. And she uses the example of...
Yeah, and she uses the example of Raphael's Sistine Madonna.
Okay.
And she's like, look, he wasn't just painting a mother and child. He was expressing the ideal of motherhood and childhood.
Okay.
Right?
So art can actually...
So the experience of beauty, she says...
Elevates us.
It actually quickens evolution.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this science, we've got this morality, we've got this art.
Yeah.
How does philosophy
with philosophy
play into all this?
She defines philosophy as like the mind's attempt to explain life in a way that the intellect can grasp.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And she says there are like 3 basic viewpoints on where everything comes from.
Okay.
Right? You have materialism, you have idealism, and then you have the theosophical view.
So materialism is like everything is just matter.
Yeah, like everything comes from matter. That's it.
Okay.
And then idealism is like, no, it's all in the mind.
It's all just ideas.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, and then Theosophy says...
What does Theosophy say?
Well, Theosophy says that spirit and matter aren't 2 different things.
Okay.
But they're 2 aspects of the same thing.
Okay.
Which is the all, or the one.
Okay.
Right?
Aye.
And they come from the logos together.
Okay.
And they go back to that oneness.
Okay.
At the end of a cycle.
And she cites?
Mm-hmm. And she's constantly referring to...
The secret doctrine.
Secret doctrine.
Okay. And the
Science of Peace.
The Science of Peace.
By Bhagavan Das.
Okay.
As these key texts.
And she also mentions the logos having 3.
Yeah. She talks about how the logos has this like...
Parts to it. Triplicity to it, right? Will, wisdom, and creativeness.
Okay.
And that this is reflected in the human monad.
Okay, so we're like made in the image of
miniature versions of
the logos.
Yeah.
Okay, and then how does she describe?
And she talks about how we can know the universe.
Like humanity's role.
Yeah, like through these different bodies that we have. And she even suggests that there's like a potential for planetary consciousness.
Okay.
And cosmic consciousness.
Okay, so we can actually expand our...
Yeah, like we can expand our awareness.
To encompass the whole...
Like the whole universe.
Cosmos.
Okay, and so she views humanity as this.
Right. She sees us as these eternal spiritual
intelligence.
Spiritual intelligence.
With these inherent power.
With these powers that
we haven't fully developed yet.
Haven't. Right. And she even says that like...
Universes are just like instructive toys.
Instructive toys for us to...
For us to play with.
Play with.
And learn from.
Okay. And then what about thought power?
Yeah. So with thought power...
Because that's something that comes up a lot.
She sees thought as a manifestation of that creativeness of the logos.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And she says you can use this to quicken your evolution.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
You can use it to develop yourself.
Okay.
And this is what yoga is all about.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
It's about uniting your consciousness with the universal self.
Okay.
Through concentrated thought.
So our thoughts aren't just...
Right. So our thoughts aren't just these meaningless things.
Random.
They actually have power
to
shape reality.
And she also talks about how actions...
She talks about action as being this...
Or like threefold
process, right?
Okay.
You have desire.
Okay.
Then you have thought. And then you have the physical act.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So the desire is like the impetus. The thought is the plan.
Okay.
And then the physical act is like the execution of that plan.
Okay. Right.
And that leads into...
And this kind of leads into the idea of reincarnation.
Reincarnation.
Right. Okay. Which is this process where the individuality, the higher self, takes on new bodies for each life.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And this happens across different planes.
Okay.
You have the physical world, the astral realms, the heavenly worlds.
Okay.
And it's all driven by this unfolding of consciousness.
So why reincarnate? Like, why not just...
Right. So she says reincarnation is necessary because of the limitations of matter. Right? Like our physical bodies, they can only develop so much.